As the U.S. battles a summer surge in coronavirus cases, new polling by CBS News shows concern over the Delta variant is high, but that's more among vaccinated Americans. 72% of people who are fully inoculated are worried about the spread of the highly contagious strain, compared to the 48% who are not vaccinated. Meantime, there's a partisan divide when it comes to getting the shot in the Biden administration's vaccination efforts. Most Republicans believe the government is doing too much in trying to get Americans vaccinated. For more on this, let's bring in CBS News Elections and Surveys Director Anthony Salvanto. So Anthony, fascinating research and polling that you and your team have done. What are you seeing as some of the common trends among the unvaccinated?
Hey, Vlad. So let me start with what you mentioned at the top. Let's look at the people who are concerned about that Delta variant. What you said to everybody is that the fully vaccinated are more concerned. Now, why is that? Some of our colleagues even have used the term two Americas in describing how people are dealing with this pandemic. We have seen people since the start of it who've just been more concerned about their personal health, concerned about the public health implications of all of this, and they're the ones who are more likely to go out and get vaccinated in the first place. So when we see concern about the Delta variant, they're the folks, and the vaccinated folks, who are the ones picking it up. So it's not just necessarily a medical assessment, but it's also that wider concern that we've seen throughout, more so than the folks who aren't vaccinated. And the other point to this, which you said at the top, let me speak to the partisan breaks. They're not quite full splits. There are still plenty of Republicans who have gotten vaccinated, just not at the same rate that we're seeing that among Democrats. When you look at the people who tell us still that they won't get one, and look, the polling on this is tracked actually very closely to CDC actual vaccination numbers throughout this rollout, it's still disproportionately more Republicans who say they won't get one. And the last thing I'd add there, Vlad, is that then goes back to what you said at the top, which is there now this sort of public health or public policy pushback that has a partisan tinge to it, where Republicans, a majority of them, say that they think the administration is doing too much to get people vaccinated, Vlad.
So then, did you get any clarity as to why those who are getting vaccinated, what it is that's keeping them from getting the shot?
Yeah. Hey, Anne-Marie. So let's start with this. Some public health officials I've heard have said, well, when it gets into the hands of doctors, when it's doctor-patient and they're saying you should get it, or even here's the shot when they can administer it, would that change things? Well, right now, for the people who say they wouldn't get it, the answer is no. There's this big 3/4 who say they still wouldn't get it even if their doctor was giving it to them. The other part of this is when we ask people why it is you won't get it, some of the top answers that they've consistently given, they're worried about side effects. For some, they just don't get vaccines, they tell us. Many say they don't trust the government. Many say they don't trust the science. Well, look, as people get vaccinated, the remaining unvaccinated, the concentration of those sentiments is then increased within that group. So as we track this and you see these increases from June even to now, you've got an increasing concentration of people who are worried about the side effects in that remaining group. And with that, I think the implication is does it then get harder and harder to get those remaining folks vaccinated, given those sentiments? Finally, I'll quickly add this. There's been talk about whether or not it's convenient for people. Maybe they're in hourly wage jobs. Maybe it's inconvenient for them to take the time off that they need to go get vaccinated. And we do see a little bit of income break in this, where a slight majority of people who earn relatively less money say that it would be inconvenient for them to go through the process of getting vaccinated.
Anthony, I wonder too, when you look at that poll that suggests that some people don't trust the government, but I scratch my head over that, because if, for example, former President Trump and other high-profile politicians in those states that are largely Republican would come out forcefully and tell their constituents and tell their citizens to get vaccinated, I wonder what the math would look like then. In other words, would we not have hit the goal of President Biden to get the significant number of Americans vaccinated by July 4th? Would we be seeing the same surge in the Delta variant that we're seeing right now, specifically among the unvaccinated, if you had more Republican politicians and people who have high-profile positions, high-profile platforms in media coming out and suggesting that, or essentially imploring people to get vaccinated? Would that change the calculus?
You know, we've tried testing that in some other recent polling. We've asked, how much credit does the Trump administration get? Because a lot of the virus obviously was developed under his administration. And people say it deserves, most people say he deserves at least some credit. And we've asked people, you know, did you know that Donald Trump has said in some interviews, I believe, you know, that people should get vaccinated? Does that move the needle? And it's marginal. It's marginal at best. Now, we don't know the full answer to your question, which is if there was a concerted effort, if there was a lot of messaging out there. That remains a mystery. But, you know, the immediate part, you wonder if the model, the causality in the model, which way it runs. So is it that people were who were always mistrustful of the government would then gravitated towards supporting politicians who also echoed those sentiments, and perhaps, you know, former President Trump picked up a lot of that, or if it's the other way around, if they're taking those partisan cues, taking those political cues, and what effect that might have. So the early evidence is some, but we don't know what a full-on, you know, coordinated push would do. Having said that, we do see those big partisan breaks, Vlad.
So I want to ask you about the economy now, which is directly connected to the pandemic. You know, there are experts out there that have warned inflation is coming, or we're seeing it now. Vlad has complained liberally about the price of vintage guitars lately, how they've gone through the roof. But it's other things too. You can't get a new car. They're really expensive. Used cars are really expensive. I'm curious about, you know, how people are feeling about the rising prices. Are they concerned about the economy? Are they concerned about, you know, the impact that this may have as we try to sort of right the ship as we emerge from this pandemic?
Well, the first answer to that, Anne-Marie, is that people are feeling pretty good about their own finances. So we've got a majority saying their own finances are okay, which, look, coming out of the pandemic, coming out of the economic, you know, upheaval we've seen is probably pretty good. But on that particular point, the price of things that you pay for. Now, I didn't list vintage guitars here. I'm still playing an old Stratocaster myself. So, and not as well as you, Vlad. I have to add that. Not nearly as well. So the price of gasoline, though, necessary things, people feel like it's going up. The price of groceries, they feel like those are going up. So people are seeing this. People are feeling it, even the price of power and electricity. So this is one of those things we want to watch as we go forward. Okay, your finances are feeling better, feeling okay, but as these things kick in and you start having to have higher household expenditures, what kind of pressure does that put on you?
Rock and roll is always necessary, Salvanto. We got to set up a jam session
there you go.
very soon. Gas is important too, though. I get it.
All I've got is I'm one of those 3 chords in the truth guys. You know,
you can play a lot of songs with 3 chords. Been doing it my whole life.
That's great. Anthony, it's always great talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thanks.